President Barack Obama held his press conference just yesterday giving his reaction to the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case, talking about his experience being racially profiled in America before becoming a U.S. Senator. Now, a lot of people on the right reacted with, well, racism to what they were saying. But even reasonable people would say that, yes, President Barack Obama has his experiences, but those are just anecdotal. It's just anecdotal evidence. It doesn't really necessarily mean anything. So fine, let's dispense with his personal experiences. Let's forget about Trayvon Martin being racially profiled, tracked down, and shot in his own neighborhood. Let's move to the stats, to the numbers, because this is America. Race has been studied, and we do have some great information. So we have 4 different charts detailing statistically how racial profiling and racism still does exist in numerous facets of the U.S. Judicial system. So first, justified homicides. So, in Florida, we have Stand Your Ground. That is in a number over 20 states in the U.S. right now. But you can have justified killings even without Stand Your Ground. Self-defense is a defense that people sometimes raise. So, when you have different racial pairings, black and white, when you have killings, what are the chances that the killing will be considered to be justified? So we have this chart that's coming from Frontline. PBS explains that the figures represent the percentage likelihood that the deaths will be found justifiable compared to white-on-white killings. You see there on the left the 2 different sections for both black-on-black and black-on-white crime. In both cases, they are less likely to be seen to be justified than white-on-white crimes, at least 50 to almost 100% less justifiable. And you'll notice there the 3 different bars in each case. It doesn't seem to matter much if it's a Stand Your Ground state. Whether it is or it's not, it's much less likely to be seen to be justified than white-on-white crime. And I'm sure that while I've been saying this, you've been looking at that rightmost third of the graph. White-on-black crime, incredibly likely to be seen to be justified. Even in non-Stand Your Ground states, they're about 225 to 250% more likely to be seen to be justified than white-on-white killings. And again, with the news coming out of the last year over Stand Your Ground, you're not going to be surprised to find out that that far-right one, 350% more likely when a white person in a Stand Your Ground state kills a black person, then it will be seen to be justified. Now, maybe in these hundreds of different murder cases, the black person's always in the wrong. I guess that's a possibility, but it seems somewhat unlikely, and so I think this chart is quite interesting. Secondly, turning to something that's been covered quite a bit in New York City, stop and frisk. You've heard the news. Blacks and Latinos make up, on average, about 85% of those stopped under the stop and frisk policies. Now, as a percentage of the population, are they 85% of the population? Is it just simply a demographic fact that that's how often they're going to be stopped? No. While blacks are stopped, about 53% of the stops are of African Americans. They make up just 25% of the population in New York City. Hispanics also overrepresented in stops, from 31% when they only make up 29% of the population. Now, whites actually are only stopped in about 10% of all cases, despite the fact that they make up 1/3 of New York City's population. And so obviously there is a great deal of racial profiling going on. This is not just isolated incidents of cops getting it wrong. It is institutionalized in the program. And unfortunately, Mayor Bloomberg, who in many issues gets it right, says that we need to be stopping more racial minorities under the stop and frisk program. So that's incredibly discouraging, especially, and this is not Florida, this is not the deep South. We're talking about New York City, which we consider to be relatively liberal, at least on some issues. Third chart, we're going to talk about drug arrests for white and black drug users. Now, if you're a conservative, you're not gonna buy the next stat that I give you, but turns out that white and black people in America use drugs at roughly the same rate. Despite that, blacks have been nearly 4 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana possession. Not marijuana distribution or anything like that, simply people who possess marijuana that they intend to consume. 4 times more likely. That number, in fact, has grown more disparate over time. You see, from 2001 to 2010, the number of arrests for blacks is shooting up. And this is while the country is undergoing an amazing revolution in terms of how we view marijuana possession and consumption. Many states around the country are now legalizing it either for medicinal use, for recreational use, in all cases, in some cases. And still, blacks being disproportionately arrested despite the fact that they use marijuana at roughly the same rate. And finally, let's talk about the death penalty, because, here we're talking about people being, stopped for something, maybe even locked up, but now we're actually talking about something that is life and death. When you look at executions for interracial murders, White defendant, black victim, you can barely see it on the chart there. Black defendant, white victim, a massive increase right there. And so when it comes down to life and death, obviously the judicial system is not race neutral. It is not race blind. Lady Justice does see the color of your skin. So whether you agree with what Barack Obama said about his life experience, whether or not you think that in the particular case of Trayvon Martin there was racial profiling that led to his death, we don't need to look at the anecdotal evidence. We have statistical evidence from multiple states around the country going back for, in some of these cases, many decades. Racism is institutionalized in the justice system of the United States. If you look at these charts, I think that it's going to be hard to disagree with that.